Hi, another episode of Guest with Nazir, and today we are honored that we have very special guest, South Yorkshire's High Sheriff, and we welcome him in our show. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Mohammed.
Could you please tell our viewers about your early days and your education?
Yes. Born and brought up in Doncaster, and did my primary education in Doncaster. My secondary education was in Malvern in Worcestershire. Then back to Yorkshire to university in Leeds. Then law school in London for the 6 months, as it was then, for training. And then back to Doncaster to take up my articles, as it was called then. It's a training contract, now it used to be called articles.
And when you qualified, who was your role model or who was your ideal personality?
When I qualified in 1972, my first practicing certificate was signed by Lord Denning, the Master of the Rolls then. It was his responsibility to admit solicitors as part of the Master's responsibility. And because his name was forever being mentioned in law school and training in those days, then I suppose he was certainly, if not a role model, he was a legal icon that I looked up to.
And in terms of practice, which area of law you have practiced?
Well, like most of us, I'm sure you included, you like to get a good grounding in as many fields as possible and to enjoy the vocational bit at the same time as trying to taste all aspects of legal life. So in my training, nowadays it's called seats, isn't it? But in my training I covered most areas. I wanted to try my hand at advocacy. I wanted to cut my teeth in a magistrate's court, so I did some crime. I did family work, all the typical work in the day in the 70s that a general practice solicitor should undertake. There came a time, though, as you develop as a lawyer, that choices are made. Sometimes those choices are made because the practice has a need for a specialist. Sometimes they're made on the back of, well, here's two options, which way do you want to go? And I think there was a time in the late 70s when it was a choice between pursuing a career in family law or taking up the opportunity to work with insurance companies, and I chose the latter and never had any regrets, really.
And when you retired from profession?
I carried on with my practicing certificate until 2006 and then retained kind of a consultancy role in terms of introduction of clients and being connected to the firm. So 2008 was the last time I had direct contact with my practice to assist clients and so on, to assist them.
And at what stage you get involved with this constitutional role of High Sheriff?
Well, quite a long journey, really. Because I was retiring relatively early in terms of years, I had an ambition to stop at 57 and was able to fulfill that. I knew that I would have to fill my time and wanted to take up community work. And I suppose with doing work in the community as a volunteer, that brings you from time to time across the path of people like the Lord Lieutenant or a High Sheriff or however. So voluntary work was something I took to. Just before I finished practice, I had taken up a trusteeship for Bluebell Wood, which was in those days little more than an idea or a dream to get a children's hospice built. As it happened, stayed with them for 13 years. But the idea of High Sheriff never crossed my mind, in the sense that I was paddling my canoe in the voluntary sense, enjoying what I did. I did have to meet the Lord Lieutenant to consider a royal visit, whether it would be possible once the hospice was opened and up and running, whether we could engineer a royal visit. And I learnt then how complicated these things are and how difficult they are to arrange. But bless him, the last Lord Lieutenant came to our help and indeed did organise a royal visit. And I suppose it's during that time that I was exposed to him and the sort of work that he was doing around the boroughs. And he invited me to be a deputy lieutenant in 2009. And some of the events that I did covering for him, because he can't be in all places at once, would bring me into contact with, yes, the civic role and from time to time crossing the path of a High Sheriff in action. About 4 years ago, I was approached by the then incumbent, It seemed to me to be an invitation out of the blue to say, would I consider it? And it was at that point I had to try and find out what the role entailed, whether I could consider it.
For our viewers, so what is the main role under the Constitution, and what are the constitutional duties of High Sheriff in a county?
Well, this is a long answer. I'm sorry, I'll try and make it as short as I can, but it has a huge historical significance. First of all, it's the oldest secular office outside of the monarch, so it dates back to Saxon times, and it was one of the few offices that well, after the Norman conquest, the Normans decided they would adopt it. Most of the other Saxon constitutional elements, if you like, were let go, but High Sheriffs survived from what was then a role as a tax collector, and they secured a fairly bad reputation, really, in that sense, in that when we came to, for example, Robin Hood's time in the 1200s and the reign of King John, steps had to be taken to rein in what the sheriff was up to. So the expression robber baron, I think, was probably prevalent at the time. Too much power, too much abuse of power. Collecting taxes for the monarch had its pros and cons. If you didn't collect enough, the monarch might ask you to pay it from your own pocket. If you collected too much, you became very unpopular with the peasants. So from that day on, from Magna Carta, really, so 800 years ago, it's been modified as a role to lose its stringent powers and to replace those with ceremonial or representational powers instead. So in today's terms, forget about Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's about principally a support for the royal family in our county. The principal aim then of the Lord Lieutenant is to organise, for example, the liaison with the royal family when they visit. The High Sheriff will support that. The High Sheriff is the Queen's representative for all things legal, law and order, and all the related agencies that support law and order. So again, my duty would be to ensure the welfare of the High Court judges. Historically, it was to ensure the protection of the High Court judges. Happily, that duty now passes to the police and so on. But the welfare of the High Court judges, which I think is very important. They come up here from London to deal with some very, sometimes unpleasant and lengthy and difficult cases. And they stay in remote lodgings, sort of detached from the public and the county. And they need to know a bit more about the county when they visit. So I make it my job to ensure that they're looked after, they have company, they are networking and mixing with the community, with the university, with the important functions of the county. I'll carry on. So the next role after that would be some of the statutory roles which survive from Magna Carta. So, for example, citizenship ceremonies. If somebody wants to become a citizen of the UK, they have to go quite a lengthy process to subscribe to that. And at the end of that process, they are asked to make an affirmation or an oath. And they will do that before usually a civic dignitary such as myself to hear the oath and welcome them to British citizenship. Also stemming from Magna Carta is the right to be a returning officer. The obligation within the county vests in the High Sheriff, who is little more than a ceremonial figurehead for that. So all of our cities and towns have an acting returning officer who by statute will undertake the electoral law, but I have the right, which I shall exercise next week, to be the returning officer for one constituency. Another role involves the networking with charities. Each of our 4 boroughs in the county has a number of charities, or many of which we know about because they're linked to the databases for voluntary action organisations, to touch base with as many of those as I can in the year to support them, help them on the way, maybe help them network with other organisations if they've got problems, look after, recognise, cajole, encourage, and perhaps a metaphorical pat on the back for charities where there's an unsung hero who needs to be given some attention and perhaps some press. What else? The other areas would probably involve networking with a not-for-profit organisation to bring them into contact with funders, making sure that the universities, all the institutions really of the county are recognised and talk to each other. So
and what is the role about the, especially with the emergency services and the police?
Well, yeah, I didn't mention the emergency and rescue services. They are seen as an extension of the arm for law and order. So whether it be ambulance or fire service, they do a fantastic job. And again, it's important to be around them and to understand what they do and to try and continue encouragement. The police, obviously, the principal organ for reducing crime, catching criminals, supporting that, understanding their function. And traditionally, the High Sheriff of South Yorkshire has always enjoyed and continues to enjoy a fantastic relationship with the Chief Constable and his principal command. And during my year, I'll be taking every opportunity to see the functions of the police and the way they work and how they work, and to encourage them along the way, I hope.
And how you see your role, especially in community cohesion and integration, especially when UK is going through difficult times, especially when we talk about integration and cohesion?
It's an important part. It's a difficult part to sum up in words because different conditions call for different responses and different touches. But I think it's generally accepted that we're a multicultural county. We have a number of, if you like, non-ethnic communities who have joined us. It's important that they're welcomed. It's important that we integrate. It's important we understand each other, first of all. And so, you know, some of the events of the past few months and the disclosures, whether it be Rotherham, Sheffield or wherever, we've got to get to grips with that on both sides of the fence, understand it and try and work together towards solutions, which is why I was only too happy last year to get involved, for example, in the South Yorkshire Muslim Community Forum. And we'll continue to work in whatever way we can to understand each other better and help each other. And I think it's a two-way process. It's not about us saying, you know, to a newer community, this is how we want you to behave. It's not at all. It's about how they understand what our aims are, and indeed trying to bring the two together in a sensible way, joined-up way.
And in coming days, how you see the role of South Yorkshire Muslim Community Forum? It will develop in the way organically it wants to develop, and I think it'll be quite a slow-moving process because one doesn't want to tread too carefully, but at the same time it's about understanding first and eventually opening up to each other and bearing some home truths on both sides of the. So I hope it works well and successfully. All the initial signs from the first two major meetings are positive, really. So we're enjoying meeting each other, understanding each other's cultures, enjoying each other's foods, and so on. Yeah, hope it goes well. Now we have some rapid-fire questions for you.
Okay.
Your favorite food?
Well, Italian would have to be up there somewhere. Can I have another one? Can I have freshly cooked fish? That's one of my favourites. Yeah.
And your favorite place to visit?
Can I have more than one?
Of course.
My favourite place to visit was a terrific treat we indulged in 2 years ago to go to the Galapagos Islands. That was absolutely mind-blowing, really, a tremendous experience. Again, a favourite place for me though in Europe would be São Rafael, its beaches and surroundings in southern Portugal.
And your favourite sport and player?
Yeah, interesting. I've changed my sport, really. I used to be very, very keen football watcher. I can still watch it, but with less passion. And as I've got older, I've become to understand and appreciate cricket better. Favourite cricketer? Have to be a Yorkshireman, have to be Joe Root, I think.
So Joe Root is your favourite?
Yeah.
And in terms of any interesting incident of your life you want to share with our viewers while you were practicing as a solicitor, or any incident you want to share with our viewers?
Well, with my High Sheriff hat on at least, I think the Royal Maundy ceremony in Sheffield, which obviously was hosted only a matter of 2 weeks ago, was a terrific occasion, a magnificent example of how our constitutional monarchy works, how we do it better than anybody else in terms of the ceremonial, but for me the chance and opportunity indeed I was formally presented to Her Majesty the Queen, so that will remain with me for some time, I think. In terms of legal experiences, I had many and enjoyed many, and it wasn't always enjoying a win or a great result, although the one or two times when I went to the Court of Appeal biting my nails as to which way it was going to go, and happily for me every time we did go to the Court of Appeal we got the decision we wanted. But Yep, no, numerous ones really, where justice prevailed and one understood the system had worked, and an individual either was acquitted because it was right to be acquitted, or indeed an individual was punished, perhaps rightfully so.
And how you see your role if we will compare with other European countries, how you see your role as a High Sheriff of South Yorkshire?
Interestingly, I had a Portuguese friend who I've known for a long time who came to the induction ceremony, and I tried to explain to him in simple terms what it was all about, and because it does stem from the Crown, because it's a Crown appointment ultimately, and because his initial reaction was, well, I've only known republics and I'm not too fond of kings and queens, and I think Portugal probably got rid of their monarch probably 50 years ago or something. But what was interesting was to see his reaction to the ceremony, and again the way we did it, and the way that the judge was presided over the ceremony, and generally again a certain amount of history, pageant, pomp and so on in terms of the oath that I made to undertake the office. I have to say my knowledge of what happens in most European countries is very limited, but I suspect no other country does it like the United Kingdom. We are pretty special at keeping what on the one hand is a fairly potentially old-fashioned office, but has some very meaningful responsibilities and duties, which I hope to fulfil in a serious way.
And any quick message for our viewers?
I will be doing some charitable pushes, so I want to be riding my bicycle and supporting charities. I want to be getting locked up in what's known in those days as the jail and bail event. I want to do some sleep outs on behalf of charities that I support, and indeed charities that I will support. I do have a website. If you Google South Yorkshire and High Sheriff, you'll find me, and as the year develops you'll see some progress in some of my charitable work. If any of that resonates, or you think your charity would benefit from a visit, please get in touch, please invite me, please let me come and see what you're up to in whatever branch of society, particularly, may I say, as a result of today, in terms of any community cohesion initiative. Let me come and meet you. I'm sure I'll be inspired, and bring it on.
Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. In coming days, we'll bring more new guests and more knowledge, more stories, and I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. John, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have enjoyed our company. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I've enjoyed it very much. I shall keep you posted with the developments, and yeah, keep you informed of any news that I might have that'll be useful to your viewers.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.